Okay. Sarah,
Hi.
I observed you teaching a math lesson on Tuesday, June 1st. You were teaching Unit 4, Lesson 1, right?
Yes.
So I just want to start by asking you how you think the lesson went.
I think it went pretty well. Definitely see places where I could have improved in the lesson. I felt like they got the idea of what we were doing, which was place value with decimals. I think they had a good grasp on it by the end, but I think it could have been a lot more interactive. I wish I had had more materials and tools for them to be using during the lesson to make it more interactive, but I think overall it went pretty well.
Overall, pretty well. Good. Do you feel like everyday math, our math curriculum, could provide more of that, or do you think they give enough, and maybe, considering
I think
COVID and all that, maybe you can't be more interactive?
I think COVID is a big part of it, so we can't really pass out. Usually with the materials that we have for math, we have the kids share them. And with COVID, we don't have enough for each kid to have their own set, so we can't use them right now because they would have to share them and they can't be sharing them. So and plus with the decimals, we really only have the tools to use for the tenths and the hundredths. We don't have tools for the thousandths.
Right.
So I think having the worksheet that I gave them was good because they had the visual of what a thousandth looked like.
Right,
so
a reference point.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I think everyday math does, if I can remember correctly, because I don't have any materials in my classroom, but I think they provided some manipulatives for the kids to use, but it's just we can't really use them right now because of COVID.
Yeah, so that's something that would have to be provided to you mostly by us, by the school. And what do you feel like was the best part of your lesson, do you think?
I would say probably just having the kids come up and explain their thinking, I think, is usually the best part for any type of lesson, just because it gets me to stop talking, gets other kids up and talking, which I think allows for more engagement from the class in general. They're more interested in what their peers have to say. So I think that part probably was the more interesting part for them overall, just because they could see each other's thinking and listen to each other and give them a chance to explain what they were thinking.
Yeah, I agree. Sometimes it's easier to understand from another student or a peer. They might explain it differently.
Yeah.
Since I actually made a note about that in your observation, because I noticed that you had one student come up to the board and give the answer, 1 in 78 thousandths.
Yep.
And then you had another student come up who had a different answer.
Yeah.
And before he came up, you prefaced and said, "Oh, it's okay to have a wrong answer. We're learning something new. So it's okay to not be right. So it's okay if this answers are wrong." I thought that was a good way to, lead into his wrong answer.
Yeah, so
because the other student was right.
That's what happens usually when the first kid comes up and they put their answer on the board and everyone realizes it's the right answer. I might have even indicated that it was right. So anyone else who comes up to give an answer knows, people tend to put their hands down because they know their answer is going to be wrong. So I wanted to encourage them to come up because I think that's there are a lot of kids who made that same mistake, and that's a good thing to bring up and just talk about common mistakes and misconceptions with any type of math that you're learning.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree, and that's what I was going to say is I thought that was a good strategy to talk about that incorrect answer and why it was incorrect, because that is, his mistake was a very common mistake with decimals, and I'm sure, even though he was the one brave enough to go up there,
right,
I'm sure he was not the only one. So I thought it was really great that you made him feel comfortable to go up to the board and give that answer, even though he knew it was not going to be the right answer.
Right.
When you're getting students to participate, do you have a preferred method to call on students, whether it be just cold calling on a student at random? I know some people use popsicle sticks or an app.
So it's something that I haven't even thought so much about this year, just with being home for most of the year and being on Zoom. It's been very much just calling people who either have their hands up or cold calling on people. Now that we're back in school, I'm realizing that I haven't really done anything besides cold call or volunteer answers, ask kids to volunteer. But I always have in the past really enjoyed doing the popsicle sticks with their names on it, and I'll pull names out at random, just because I feel like that keeps them more focused, because they know that their name could be called on at any time. one thing I do if we're doing any sort of like sharing answers for math, if we have like a whole worksheet of answers, or reading anything, I'll have someone, like, let's say, share an answer to number 1, and then they pick the person who's going to answer number 2. So that kind of keeps their attention as well. But I wish I had done more, now that it's the end of the year. I wish I had done more, something with calling names besides just cold call, but I didn't really put anything in play this year when we came back, so.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. I know there are also some teachers that use Class Dojo, and if you just choose random, it kind of generates for you.
Yeah.
So I know some teachers might use that to be a little bit more, because, you know, you're not thinking of who you're calling on, right? You could be calling the same person every single day and skipping somebody.
Totally.
So the name, generator app does help to do that.
Yeah, that's good, because I always have Dojo open, so it's just an easy way to pick names.
Right.
Yeah.
And talking about the students that are remote this year has been quite unique.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel like you engage your students who are remote, since you have so many students in front of you? Yeah,
it's a challenge for sure. That's been one of the biggest struggles, is keeping them engaged. And I just try to remind them, like, we're here, we see you guys too, so, I'd love to see you participate. It's hard. I call on them as much as I can. Sometimes I will cold call on them, but it's hard with like the Wi-Fi and the internet issues, because sometimes it's not that they're not participating, it's that their internet's going in and out and they can't hear. What I will do sometimes, if we're going over like a worksheet, I'll save a chunk of problems for the kids at home, and I'll say, okay, boys and girls in school will answer the odd questions, and at home you'll answer the even questions, just to keep them part of the lesson. But I do like to use them a lot if we're reading anything out loud, like directions or anything, because their voices are more magnified than everybody else's over the speaker. So I do call on them for a lot of reading directions and word problems and things like that out loud.
I think that's great. It's been a challenge for a lot of people to, keep those students engaged, because it's difficult, especially internet problems.
Yeah, exactly.
Definitely play a role. Another part of student engagement that I observed in your class was that when you had students who were done, or when it was time to finish that practice, you had students, you had said, stand up if you're finished. Do you feel like that's an effective way, or maybe like what is the reason that you do that? Yeah,
I like that. It's mostly started doing that for myself, so it's a visual for me to see who's done, because sometimes you just don't know when a kid's done with their with a problem. I used to sometimes I'll do like hands on your head or whatever if you're finished, but standing up is just a little bit easier because they're not like sitting there like this forever. But yeah, I use that for a lot of different things, like answering questions. Like, if you got this answer, stand up. If you got this answer, sit down. Just keeps them moving, keeps them active, which I think keeps them a little more engaged instead of just sitting at their desk the whole time. Just get them moving a little bit.
Yeah, I think that makes great sense, and I like that idea. Can I do the remote students also participate in that?
Yeah.
Like, will they stand up?
So they will sometimes. If I don't always adjust it for them, but sometimes I'll notice them standing too. Like, you'll see their like heads gone out of the picture, but they will use a lot of the raise hand feature for that too.
Oh, okay,
so
that makes sense.
I'll tell them at home, if you're finished, you can raise your hand to show me that you're done.
That's great.
Yeah.
I think that would be a good strategy for kids at home. I know several that are laying in their beds or something.
Standing
so
up's not an option.
Forces you to be more engaged and not
Yes.
seeming as if you're not even
asleep.
there.
Yeah.
So at the end of your lesson, you had the students do a practice page, or a few examples of a practice page. Do you use that to test mastery of the skill that you were working on, or do you are you not ready for mastery yet?
Yeah, for this lesson in particular, it was more just an understanding of what we're doing, kind of grasping it. I wouldn't say mastery yet, because we definitely spent a couple days on that lesson, just understanding. I feel like last year in 4th grade, I think they got cut off when they were working on fractions, so they didn't even quite get to decimals, so they're definitely lacking in that area. So I wanted to really make sure that they understood. So that activity was more used for just making sure they had like a general understanding of what we were doing, but we spent a few more days working on that mastery of that.
Okay, great. And when you test a student's mastery to see, do you have mastery? Do you just do you do a small quiz? Do you wait until the unit test? Do you do anything smaller, like an exit ticket?
Yeah, so that's one thing that I haven't done a lot of this year that I wish I, again, had remembered to incorporate more were exit tickets, because I didn't do a lot. Usually what I find is, like, all of a sudden the block is over and we're out of time, and so I don't leave myself time for that exit ticket. But I do try to do a lot of little quizzes instead of just focusing on the unit test. So once we finish like a chunk of lessons that are all on the same topic, I'll give a little quiz on that topic, or go onto iReady and assign a quiz on iReady that's on that topic. So that's what I had done for most of the math lessons this year. It was I would give chunks with like a little quiz with a chunk of lessons.
Okay. And with your quizzes leading up to a test, do you find that there's time to go back and do any reteaching, or do you feel like it could be the schedule, it could be curriculum mapping and guiding and pacing?
This year I think it was hard to be able to go back and reteach, just because we were already strapped for time as it was. Like our blocks were shorter anyway, but I feel like the quiz is usually used as a reteach. I don't feel like there's enough time in the schedule to really go back and focus, like spend a couple days on a topic. But we just use that quiz for a quick reteach.
And do you feel like it's something that is worthwhile, do you think, for administration to maybe go back and kind of consider reteaching days when they may be giving a pacing guide? Or if you don't have a pacing guide, would that be something worthwhile to put in
Yeah, I think so. I think the kids, as soon as you move on to a new topic, they lose what they had learned, and I just don't think there's enough time in the main block for that. So I think it would be a good thing to incorporate somewhere in the schedule, some sort of reteaching block.
That's great. And if you were to have taught this lesson again, it could be after, this meeting, or just after seeing how the lesson went, do you feel like there's anything that you would teach differently or do differently within the lesson?
Yeah, I think I would try to incorporate manipulatives of some sort, even if we can't use the standard decimal place value blocks, just giving them some sort of tool that they can use to represent each of the 3 place values to model it. I just think that gives a lot more physical manipulation of the materials to figure out what the decimals are. I think that's just a better way of learning for a lot of kids. So I would definitely like to incorporate something more physical for them.
Okay, great. And do you use whiteboards ever as a way to build up student engagement, and also it has that small assessment piece in it?
Yeah, tons. So we do them almost every day. We would do whiteboards instead of paper and pencil for work. Okay. So anytime I would give a warm-up problem or a practice problem, I would have them solve it on a whiteboard, and then I have them hold it to themselves, and then when I see that most kids are done, I'll usually use the stand up. I'll have them stand up if they're done, and then I have them show me, even if they're not finished, just so I can see where they are in the problem and how far they got and who got it right, who got it wrong, and all of that. So we do use those a ton.
Okay, that's great. And we had talked a little bit about this, but do you feel like the everyday math curriculum is effective in the classroom for students, and do you feel like it's a useful resource for you as the teacher who is using it?
I think I've gotten used to it. It's been a few years of using it, and I do actually enjoy it. I think it offers good, especially when we talked about reteaching topics. The math boxes that they use spiral back to do a little bit of a spiral review, so I do like that. I think it gives good structure. There's more in it than we have time for in our block. I feel like the lessons on there are all mapped out for 1 day long, but it always takes me longer than a day to teach it, to really get the kids to understand it. But it provides a lot of really good resources, and the online components I think are really good, like the games online and things like that I enjoy using. So
awesome, that's great. And I think overall the lesson went smoothly, and we've talked about ways that it could be improved, and I think we're on the same page about those improvements. So great job.
Thanks.